Stateless is a new limited series on Netflix. It's a powerful look at immigration, refugees, and relationships. It's also based on true events, but is it worthy of your time? A refugee father separated from his family, a woman who is fleeing a psychologically damaging situation, a man struggling with job satisfaction, and a government official all have converging stories in an immigration detention facility in Australia. This is the second drama in about 2 weeks that I've seen on Netflix that deals with the topic of immigration. The first being the Netflix film Ado, and that follows a young boy's story. If you haven't seen it, it's really good. I also linked the my spoiler-free review of that in the description above. Interestingly enough, both Ado and this current limited series both have an ending graphic that talk about just stats for immigration. And it says that currently, globally, there are over 70 million people who have been displaced because of war or persecution. And over half of those are children. This 6-part series has some great dramatic roles. I mean, some of the performances are going to tear your heart out. And other ones, you're going to want to tear their heart out. We have Yvonne Strahovski, Jai Courtney, Asher Ketty, Kate Blanchett, Faisal Bazi, Dominic West, and Rachel House. Those are just some of the actors that are in this who are delivering just wonderful performances. Almost all of the story takes place at the detention center, where the unlawful non-citizens, or UNCs, are being held until they can be dealt with immigration. Either they're given visas or refugee status, or they're deported back to whatever country they came from. And some of these people, though, it takes years for them to have their case heard. So they just sit in this facility forever. We get to see so much struggle, both emotionally and psychologically, from our actors. I mean, they are really conveying the toll that being in this facility, whether as a detainee or as a worker, is having on them. I really love how the story is told, because mainly it takes place in the present, but we also do get bits and pieces as flashbacks that fill in some of the minor gaps, especially in Yvonne Strahovski's character, where we really get to see what landed her in this place and what events led up to her being here and why she finds herself in the situation that she does and why she's acting the way that she's acting. And there is an urgency and a tension to the story that just builds from the very beginning until it almost explodes at the end. I mean, you just feel it episode after episode where they're just laying like TNT on TNT on TNT. And it's just, you see that, oh my goodness, this powder keg, or I guess TNT would be more of dynamite, whatever. It doesn't matter. This huge thing of explosives is really about to do that. There's some really heavy emotional moments in this. I mean, sometimes where you see a character who is struggling whether or not they tell the truth, which could land them in certain consequences, because if they tell the truth and it's seen as a bad thing, they're instantly never given a visa or they're deported immediately. But also, if they do tell the truth, then maybe that could help explain some of their situations, which could actually lead them to getting a visa so that they can gain asylum. And you see that gamble that they take in their head. And then they hear from their co-detainees of, well, no, don't say this, or you should say this. And it's just that huge internal struggle that goes on in the characters' heads, but it comes across visually. You see them wavering. You see them just like playing out all the scenarios in their mind, but we don't get to hear that conversation, but it's so evident with what they're doing and what they're thinking. Each character is really going through their own level of torment throughout the entire series. I mean, they are on like this downward spiral, each of them going on that downward spiral. Now that sounds like it would be very, very depressing and not a good watch. But the story works amazingly well, and surprisingly, it didn't leave me in a depressed state. I mean, I wasn't running for the razors or anything like that. I was just, it ended on a positive spin, I think, at least with a little bit of hope. Not totally, and some of it is definitely melancholy, but I wasn't so far shoved down into the bell jar where I was just like, oh, I can't go on. I really love how we see the theme of honor come through in this. I mean, we especially see it in the character of Amir. He is just so full of honor and in his actions and what he does. But in other characters, Cam and Claire, we get to see it as well. Now, it does display itself in different ways, but I love that it still goes through. And so it permeates through a lot of the series. and not necessarily from characters that you would expect it to come from. In addition to the honor theme that's playing out through this is the thought of family and those relationships. And because it is a detention center, you do see families as groups in there. And what happens to them? How are they treated? How do they stay together amidst just terrible circumstances? But it's also outside the detention facility. How are family relationships being affected by the detention center, even though these people may not be in them? Like, take some of the workers. What does that, being in that environment all day, have an effect on their family life? And what does it do to them? How does it change them? Do they rise above it? Does it not affect them at all? Does it really just depress them or change them as a person? And I love that the series takes a look at that. We also get to see how it affects family members on the outside who have somebody inside the facility, and what that does, and just the unknown of what's going on, the uncertainty. I love every part of that they deal with in the family area, because I think it rings true. Like, there's just a lot of gut punches that happen, and it has this real air of genuineness to it. Each episode is about an hour long, and there's only 6 episodes, so it's really a quick watch if you choose to sit down and start it. I gotta warn you though, if you do sit down to watch it, you're probably going to want to continue on watching it back to back and finish out the series, because it really is that good and that just engaging with what's going on in the story. There's sex, no nudity, a lot of profanity, and violence, including some sexual violence. I give Stateless 4.5 out of 5 couches. What are some upcoming streaming titles that you're looking forward to? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for catching with me.